today to discuss rethinking education for nation building and economic empowerment. We have the likes of Professor Damilola Olawuyi, who is one of our speakers. Is someone I've not met in person, but I've always looked up to. As a lawyer, you have to look at mentors and people who have contributed immensely, not just the legal profession, but outside that. So he's one of our guest speakers. I'm glad he's here. We also have Mrs. Tosin Obiakere, who is the moderator. We have Dr. Jane Ezeringe and Engineer Michael Oluwalogbon. And some of these speakers are here today to delve into this topic, which is very dear to our heart. Uh, the Diaspora Social Responsibility Initiative is it's coming together of like minds, especially for people who are not just in diaspora but even people in Nigeria, to look for the way we can contribute our quota to the Nigeria entity itself, how we can solve the social problems and how we can contribute our quota to the development of our great nation. Nigeria is facing a lot of challenges right now, and we have a lot of millions of people who reside outside Nigeria, but they're Nigerians, but have decided to come back home to more like give back to the community and help people, help brands, help not just individuals or the less privileged, even elites and even we educated ones. How can we contribute our quota and change the narrative about Nigeria? That's what brought about the initiative. Like minds coming together to shine the light called to the country called Nigeria, and how we can contribute to the growth of the nation at large. That's why the topic today we've chosen is to talk more on education from the diaspora perspective. Most of the most of my colleagues in the initiative are outside Nigeria, but we have some of us who stay back home here. We represent the initiative and how we can change the narrative about Nigeria. That's why we want the audience to get involved, ask questions, and about not just about the initiative, ask questions about how we can change the Nigerian dream, how we can bring it into reality. What are the next steps? What is the way forward? Currently, Nigeria is going through a lot of economic challenges, from inflation, security challenges, all sorts. So how can we contribute our quota to change the story? It cannot be done overnight. It's we have to start somewhere. That's the reason why initiative like ours have decided to put our shoes in and help the government, because we can't leave everything in the hands of the government. They cannot do it all. So Nigerians abroad, Nigerians back home, what is the next step? What are we going to do to bring about economic prosperity, to bring about security of lives and property? What are you going to do as an individual? That is why our initiative decided to start this. So we're registered with the government with NIPCOM, and we've been licensed, we've been registered under the government. We're not just an initiative where people are just going to say, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, without going through the normal process. So basically, I want to welcome everyone to one of this is our first program, and one of many more to come in the nearest future. So I welcome all our guests, the audience. I also use the medium to welcome our speakers and the moderator. Thank you. So I'll be leaving the room for the moderator to start so we can commence the program and let the audience. And I want to also use this medium to inform the audience that they can send in their questions. There's a comment there's a comment section in between the chats where you can send in questions for the speakers. The speakers will take time to analyze the question and also dissect it and give us answers that best suits us. Thank you. Good afternoon once again. I think the moderator is in right now. I wanted to take charge, but I
Good
think she.
afternoon.
Yes, welcome, Mrs. Tosin
Thank you.
Obakeme. Yes, please. I've done a little bit of introduction of the initiative and what we try to achieve with our program. So I'd like you to go ahead and commence the program. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tosin Obiakeme, and we have a program lined up today for this conference. Sorry, I got in a little bit late. There were some kind of hitches like that. So thank you for having me here. So I would like to tell us a little bit about I don't know, I'm just coming in late, about the topic. The topic is a likely departure from conventional approaches to education with diaspora acknowledging the unique uh, challenges and opportunities faced by our communities, by Nigeria. So I would like to, at this juncture, invite Dr. Michael, I would like to invite Mr. Sunday Olawi. He's a chair of UNESCO in environmental laws and sustainable development engineer. So, Doctor, please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me too?
Yes, I can. Well, thank you
Okay,
very much.
do we have Mr. Sunday? Okay, Professor, thank you for joining us. Please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And let me start by congratulating the Diaspora initiative for bringing together or putting together this program, which aims to foster knowledge and awareness on the role of education in promoting sustainable societies, as well as, of course, the role of the diaspora in that entire picture. I was very pleased when the moderator said this was your first event. And I want you to know that good things start small. Many great things that have changed the world started small. Just took a group of motivated and inspired individuals to come together to say, we want to change the world. Initially, you will feel that your effort may be ambitious. You might even feel that there is no support for what you have set out to do. But that is exactly the path to greatness. The people that we celebrate in our world today are those that have left their comfort zone to make a change. They saw something wrong and they thought we can contribute to the process of change. And then they did not, some of the big companies today, they will tell you started in their basement or in their garage, and they had another job, a day job, and they were doing that on the side. And then, but then the side gig becomes so successful and so big that it becomes the real job. And such is the potential that I think your organization, the Diaspora Social Responsibility Initiative, such is the potential that I think you have. So I congratulate you, and I must indeed acknowledge my long lost friend, Kemi Ogunode, who facilitated my invitation. I would say congratulations to her and to the entire team. Like I mentioned, the initiative is very important because you have set out to solve just one out of the many problems facing Nigeria. Despite our abundant wealth, despite our abundant natural resources, Nigeria today ranks very low in many statistics. It has been recently described as one of the poorest, if not the poorest nation on earth. It's been described as the worst place for a child to grow up, according to UNICEF statistics. According to the Human Development Index, Nigeria life expectancy in Nigeria is now about 48 years, which means an average Nigerian is expected to die at the age of 48. So we all rely on the grace of God to keep us above that and beyond that. Electricity is epileptic, with many communities not even connected to the national grid. So electrification rate in Nigeria is one of the lowest in the world. None of our universities have been ranked in the top 100 over the last several years. As a matter of fact, the highest ranking of any Nigerian university in the World University Ranking over the last few years is 1,000. So, which means our universities are not considered to be some of the best. Of course, we have some private universities that are changing that narrative, that are aspiring, that are breaking some rankings. For example, Afe Babalola University doing very well. But of course, without support, they can only try. Without governmental support, they can only try, or we can only try. So these are the challenges facing the country. And of course, I can go on and on. I can talk about the insecurity in the country as well. Nigeria is like a pressure cooker of insecurity, whereby anyone can be kidnapped at any time. Anyone can be killed at any time. Insecurity aside, you also then have, issues of poor road network on not motorable roads. And I can go on and on, but I don't want to sound like the biblical, the book of lamentation in the Bible. So I will leave it at that. But you get the gist that Nigeria is currently in its toughest era that we've ever seen. And of course, what would definitely one other statistic that will concern the diaspora is the fact that the naira is on a rapid free fall, now exchanging for close to 1,600 for $1. In my lifetime, as young as I am, I know when naira was when $1 was 80 naira. At least I was very active at the time, and I'm quite young. I know when a dollar was 100 naira, at least very, 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 very recently. So it beats my imagination that just within the last 10 to 15 years, naira can actually change for 1,600 and threatening to go to 2,000 soon. That is the state of the Nigerian nation today. A country without direction, a country without focus, a country that has been described as a failed state by many observers. And that has triggered a wave of people leaving the country, searching for a way out. And of course, they've labeled it as the Japa syndrome. Those that can leave have left. Those that have not left are looking to leave rapidly. But in that hopelessness brought about by many years of corrupt leadership and insincere approach to governance, you can then see that the unfortunate truth or the unfortunate reality is that wherever you go, home is always home. And I call it unfortunate because it beats my imagination how I still miss Nigeria anytime and anywhere. One would think that with such hopeless statistics, you should just go and say, you know what, I would never return. But I left Nigeria at the age of 21 when I graduated with my law degree. And I was called to the bar at the age of 22. I left immediately because I was given a scholarship by the government of Canada for my master's degree at the University of Calgary. And so at 22, I was 21 going to 22, I was in Canada, in the cold city of Calgary. And of course, from Canada, I found myself in the US for another master's degree, and then in the UK for my PhD. And in all of that voyage, I had thought to myself that, you know, the image or the memory of Nigeria would fade away, but it never did. And the higher you go, even though, of course, in Canada, of course, after UK, I went back to Canada to work as a lawyer. I was practicing at the law firm Norton Rose, of course, as a practicing lawyer, you get paid very well. Life is good. You get one of those massive houses. You live there with your family, and you feel satisfied. But then, the image of Nigeria never leaves you, because that is where you belong. That is home. And the earlier we all make peace with that fact, the better. Because no matter how far you go abroad, no matter how high you rise, there would still be someone out there to remind you that you are not from here. Especially when you now start, aiming to become maybe the managing partner, or you are aiming to get to the highest level. Then all of a sudden they may not even hear your accent anymore. Your accent becomes, difficult, and you wonder, oh, when I was a junior associate, you could hear my accent very well. Now I'm trying to be the, and that is why there is a saying that in the Yoruba culture, that anyone who forgets home has put their bag of suffering on, because they will regret that decision to forget home. That a child that forgets home has hung a bag of suffering. That is the Yoruba adage. I hope I still remember it. That is because your country is the only place whereby no one can put a cap or limit on your aspirations. You can rise as high as you imagine. Many of the well-celebrated people in our societies, any country, whether they are from Canada or UK, their recognition comes from their country. They are recognized first by their country. Now, I'm a professor of international law, and I've also seen that even in the international circle as well, your nomination must come from your country. It's your country that will nominate you. So, and even if you have a British passport and you say the British government should nominate you, then they will remind you that you are an immigrant. So you get the message. The message is that the diaspora must realize that we are on a journey, but home is where you belong. And when I got that reality, was when, some of these instances I've just described happened to me as well, in which I, of course, haven't traveled to many countries, and I was practicing international law. There got to a time that I was to be appointed at a very senior level in the UN, and I was told to go and get a letter from my country, from Nigeria, to nominate me. That, well, you're qualified, but for this role, you have to be nominated by your country. And that taught me that you should never, ever lose your roots. You should never forget your home. You should never forget Nigeria. The diaspora, Nigeria is also one of those few countries that has yet to tap into the wealth of the diaspora. Because you have a situation whereby some people have, they've left the country with bad memories, and they keep reading the news and they keep getting those bad news as well. So they just, but you see some other countries like India, they've been able to develop schemes to leverage the wealth of the diaspora. So my message today is on how the diaspora, the roles of all of us to leverage the expertise and experience of the diaspora to promote education. Of course, as a professor, I'm an educator, so, and I see the many challenges facing the education sector. Poor remuneration of professors. In the news recently was a professor of law that lamented that she would have loved to go and watch the final match in Ivory Coast, but she would have had to save 6 months of her salary to be able to afford that expedition. And that's because an average full professor in Nigeria, when you convert their salary to the current exchange rate, is probably not up to $300 a month in salary. Meanwhile, in Canada, I taught law in Canada before leaving, and the minimum salary of a professor is about $10,000 a month. So, and that's even a professor that is not so well paid. If you are a staff professor, you probably earn more. So 300 versus 10,000, then you should understand why people want to leave. So poor remuneration. There's also issue of poor infrastructure, in which you have universities whereby students have to stand because there's no space to sit. There is no internet. Even as a researcher, my productivity dips anytime I'm back home in Nigeria. So because there's no internet, you have to worry about internet. You have to worry about electricity. You have to worry about all. And by the time you worry about those things and you put them together, when it's time to do the research, you're already tired and you just want to go to bed. There's poor infrastructure. There is also technology gap. Our academics not having access to the latest technology to do their research, latest databases to search for facts and to search for information. In my being an international professor, I am affiliated. Of course, I also teach in Qatar, and you'd see that they have been able to spend their natural resource wealth in a manner that the university professors are well paid. There's infrastructure to do research. There is, you get, they change your laptop for your research every 2 years or so. They do all they can to make sure you are productive. Our colleagues in the academia in Nigeria do not have the same motivation. So the university will not even give you a laptop to start with, talk less of changing it for you. So now I'm describing these things as challenges, but I've also been a businessman, being practicing in Canada. I was practicing business law, and I know that in business, whenever there is a problem, it is a business opportunity, because whoever solves that problem is the early mover who captures the market. So many of these things I've described as problems are actually business opportunities for the diaspora. Lack of technology, poor infrastructure, poor remuneration, poor focus on entrepreneurship. These are business opportunities that the diaspora can solve and become the early movers. That is why one of the biggest problems is the failure of government in Nigeria to tap into the rich wealth of the diaspora. There is indeed a need for diaspora-led reforms. there is a need to incentivize the diaspora to solve some of these wicked problems that I've described. And in many countries that have tapped into this wealth, for example, in India, you see that they've created incentives for the diaspora to come back and bring their innovation and solve and tackle some of these problems. So the big issue in Nigeria is that failure to tap into diaspora-led education. And I hope that our discussion today will start proposing solutions on how to advance this, getting the diaspora to invest in education in Nigeria, not only invest, to be part of the reform process in Nigeria. And I'll give you some examples. Like I said, I was practicing in Canada, but then one of those days I got a call from the founder of Afabala University to be involved in the university. That this was when the university was just about to I think a year old or so. And since then I've continued to I've been part of the university, teaching, doing research, doing all sort of things, and that's shown me how little steps can help. Not everyone may feel comfortable to do what they are doing abroad, to go home and go and stay in a university, but we can contribute our expertise either in full-time or in permanent, in visiting capacity. Don't forget, my earlier point is that this is where your recognition will come from. The ability to solve a problem, the ability to pick one problem and solve it is what leads to being recognized. And I'm glad since I've been involved with ABOAD, which is almost 12 years ago now, I've never regretted it because it has provided me an opportunity to contribute to teaching, mentoring the next generation. Now I see my former students who are doing big things across the world, which I would not have had the opportunity if I just stayed in Canada and said, you know what, I don't want to hear anything about Nigeria again. So the key message is to engage. Let's engage, no matter how small. Whether we're engaging in providing our services to teach in a university, whenever we're at home, on a permanent basis or a visiting basis, whether we're engaging in providing knowledge transfer, maybe exchange of resources, books, and all of that. That is an engagement. So we, as members of the diaspora community, must think of innovative ways to engage. And 12 years ago, when I first stepped into ABOAD, I taught the first set of students, and I also started my own small initiative. I started an Institute for Energy at the university. The institute has grown so big now. I started a journal, to say, well, we are going to have a world-class journal. The journal now has become ranked as one of the best journals. It has also been Scopus indexed. So in my little way, I can say, well, I have contributed, even though I've contributed in my way. I have seen one problem, which is Nigerian journals are not recognized, and I've solved it by creating a journal that will be recognized and is now recognized, about 10, 11 years after. So it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be huge. It starts with seeing this as something we should do, doing it, knowing that is where that is how we can contribute to nation building. Of course, there is a role for government in all of this. There's a role for the government to create the incentives and to create policies that will attract diaspora interest and diaspora innovation in education. And that's a message we've been passing across. Of course, we will continue to press the neck of government to create those policies. We'll continue to advocate. Our advocacy will not stop in this regard. We'll continue to advocate for policies to boost research and visibility led by the diaspora community. So that you can count on us to continue to do that. But I hope that this event will create that innovative thinking on the part of the diaspora community to say, what problem can I solve? How can I solve it? Which institution in Nigeria can I affiliate myself to and be active? How can I play a role Is it by creating scholarships for those that want to study? Is it by doing something as little as transferring books and resources from abroad to Nigeria? Is it by creating a think tank or a research think tank? Is it by creating an affiliation that will let Nigerian professors come abroad for visiting fellowships? Is it by establishing my own secondary school? Whatever. We just need to think innovatively and engage. I will end by uh, um, referring us to a quotation, one of my favorite quotes, which is to the effect that um, a reasonable person expects a reasonable person will do their best to conform to the standard of the world. But the unreasonable person will expect the world to conform to their own standard. But most of the problems of the world have been solved by unreasonable people. So I'm calling on all of us to be unreasonable by creating our own innovation and not wait for us to be part of what the world is doing, but drawing the attention of the world to ourselves as people that can solve problems. I thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Sunday Olawiyi. Thank you for those powerful insight there, those powerful words, so those powerful things you have stated. And I would like to invite to the floor the our next speaker in the person of Dr. Jane Ezerigo. Dr. Jane Ezerigo will take us for the next 30 minutes. Is Dr. Jane online?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm just going to share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, so can the host enable me to share?
It's
I've
up
been
now.
able to share, but okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hope that the screen comes up at some point.
It's up now.
Sorry?
It's up now.
Okay, it's up.
It's on the screen.
Thank you. Okay, fine. Thanks. So, good evening and good morning from my side. As was introduced, my name is Jane Ezerigwe, and today I'll be speaking on the topic exploring the dual role of education, where it fosters economic development in countries of origin and then helps in preserving diaspora cultures in the host nation. So, I have an outline. I'm just going to introduce the topic. And then my function is in two parts. First, I will discuss the role of non-formal education in the economic development of home countries of origin. And then I'll look at the need for formal education to contribute to the preservation of diaspora cultures in the host countries before I conclude. I'm going to invite us to look at the pictures on the screen. So in your mind's eye, you could look at these two pictures. The first picture up there, I'm going to call him Emeka. So he's a young orphan from the southeastern part of Nigeria. So this is Emeka, young orphan, and we're going to look at how we can get Emeka skilled enough to still be able to contribute to national development when he becomes an adult. The second picture, I would want us to call her Maya. So she's probably from the Middle Belt in Nigeria. And she's an immigrant child, first generation immigrant child in Canada. Her face is not showing, but we can obviously see that she's sad. So Maya has been bullied in school. She has some inferiority complex. Um, she doesn't quite um, um, connect to her heritage and her roots. And I will pack it at this point, and we'll revisit it later um, later in the presentation. So, by way of introduction, I'm going to start by saying that when I talk about education, I'll be talking about knowledge transfer, skill development, and entrepreneurship initiatives. And I would like us to distinguish between formal education, non-formal education, and informal education. So under formal education, you have a structured curriculum, you have standardized testing, and some examples are what you get from normal schools. You have non-formal education, which takes place under an organizational framework, usually in a community setting. Usually is intentional, but also partly incidental. Some examples will be like swimming classes. And then we can also think about informal education, which is usually unstructured, and we get them through daily experiences. Now, if informal learning becomes conscious with a defined purpose, we will normally classify it as non-formal. But I also want to put a caveat here. The issue of categorizing education into different forms is very controversial, it's very contentious, and there are a lot of debates on it. So it's not cast on stone. And for the purpose of this presentation, when I talk about informal education and non-formal education, I would be talking about the kind of the category of education I've described under informal and non-formal. So I'll use them interchangeably according to this category. Again, I'll just flag briefly that there is something called net-based education. I'll refer to it very briefly in the presentation. And then there's something called semi-formal learning. And so why should we care about these categorizations and distinctions between formal and informal education? I think we should care because it helps us to recognize that we may be diminishing the value in non-formal education as a meaningful educational pursuit. It may also help us realize that we disempower a range of learners. So under non-formal education, we've seen that because it's unstructured and happens during everyday life, usually unintentional, we usually don't recognize it as education. And so we disempower the people who get or gain their knowledge and skills through this form of education. And what is the implication? The implication is that when it comes to the labor market, when they come to the job markets, they are discriminated upon. Again, it helps us to identify opportunities. So when we begin to know that under non-formal education, for example, there is some flexibility and accessibility that we can leverage on to cater to marginalized and underserved populations, we would be able to use this medium of education to get to these people. So for example, we've been experiencing a lot of terrorism in Nigeria. People are in IDP camps. People are in rural communities. They are ungoverned places in Nigeria. And there are Nigerians living in these places with children that should grow up and be able to contribute to national development in the future. We can leverage this non-formal education mediums, the media that we can get from non-formal education, and then reach these unserved and marginalized groups.
And then just go straight.
Okay. Again, it could also help us to attend to different learning styles and job requirements. You agree with me that not everybody will go to school, not everybody wants to go to school, and then not all jobs or skills required for some jobs are not usually got from the formal education. So when we see the opportunities that exist under the non-formal education, it will help us attend to these job requirements and learning styles. It will also help us empower the individuals that go through these learning processes to enable them have some confidence and self-esteem to contribute to national development. Excuse me. So how can we integrate non-formal education for economic development? I just want to, on this slide, share with us some government efforts towards promotion of skill acquisition. So before the colonial era, vocational training was the preferred and the famous way to educate um, pre-colonial Nigeria in pre-colonial Nigerian communities. But with the coming of the white man, it was suppressed. Schools were established, including grammar schools, and then vocational studies and education wasn't promoted. It was not until 1909 that in Nasarawa school, there was a pilot, a piloting of these technicals of vocational school where they were taught leatherwork, carpentry, and bookbinding. And that was how vocational school started again in Nigeria. It was basically informal before, but that was the way it was formalized in Nigeria. And sometime in 1970s, the National Board for Technical Education was established to promote the production of skilled technical and professional manpower to contribute to national development. Again, the National Directorate of Employment was also established to attend to these group of people, and they have some program like vocational development, entrepreneurship development, agriculture, skills training, and public works program. So these are commendable efforts by the government to help reach those that need these skills in Nigeria. I know this is not supposed to be, this may not be current, but in their website as of today, they claim to have served over 3.6 million unemployed Nigerians. That's the National Directorate of Employment, and that they created about 39,000 jobs in 2013. That's commendable. There are some other initiatives on government efforts like the establishment of Quranic education, nomadic education, women and youth centers that we see around. These are all commendable. But then if we need to shift powers, approaches, and narratives, we can explore some further opportunities that I would recommend. So there should be effective integration of informally acquired skills. And by that, I mean that there should be an accreditation and certification process for skills to audit skills that are gotten informally, just to ensure that they conform to standards. So for example, we know that in most homes in Nigeria, where the father is a carpenter, he will normally take up his boys and teach them these skills, and they grow up in that house until their adult life learning carpentry with their fathers, or the girls learning weaving with their mothers, or hair plating and all of that. They grow up and they become very proficient in these skills, but then there is no way to know that they know these. Some others get them from technical schools, like I said, which can be certified, but these informally gotten ones from homes, there are no ways to recognize them. I'm suggesting that the MBTE should be able to have an assessment, an external assessment process where it audits these and assesses these skills and competencies, and then issues some certification. So if a plumber, if a carpenter, you claim you know it, you come and register with them. you go through the tests, which is practical, and then they certify you. Again, in the informally, all around the southeastern Nigeria and even some other tribes, the Igbo apprenticeship model is being engaged with. And then even under the pastoral farming, you see young pastoral headers being mentored by the older ones. These are ways of passing on skills of trade to younger ones. While there have been arguments that formalizing it will remove the inclination of promoting Ubuntu that we have in these models, I think we can leverage on the mediation centers we have at the National Security and Civil Defense Corps to make them come in to mediate between the masters and the boys, usually boys, when there are disputes, because there are usually disputes that occur. So there will usually be a contract for the Igbo system, for example. There will usually be a contract that after so number of years, you settle the boy. But most times we see that maybe after those number of years, the master will say he cannot settle the boy or he has stolen from him. Those kind of things, normally informally, they are mediated upon, but that is somewhere that the government can also come in to play a role to see how mediation centers can help them get through the disputes. The second thing is to make sure that we connect to the community. So we know that something that binds Nigerians together is usually football and then music. The National Orientation Agency could use musicians, commission them to pass on civic education and nation building messages through the music. We could also leverage on social media. I don't know. I think every day I get forwarded messages on my social media, especially in the group ones. Sometimes you get the same message 5 times in a day. We could leverage this on WhatsApp, for example. The National Orientation Agency could civic education and nation building messages, send them through WhatsApp, and I'm sure it will get to most people. Most people now use some form of social media. Again, cooperative platforms are platforms we could also connect with to deliver some critical skills. NGOs are already working with them. The government can build skill acquisition programs and connect with the cooperatives. I cannot run away from the fact that our security is already informalized. And so we have a lot of, in almost on every street, we have neighborhood guards. In the semi-urban communities, we have vigilante groups. And we've tried to pay some lip service to community policing and all of that. The point is, these are the people manning the streets of Nigeria largely. The formal policemen are attached to the big men and escort them to hotels and spas. So we need to start thinking about how we can train these informal security agencies, because sometimes when you hear some of the acts they carry out, you marvel. So this is somewhere to connect with. I read in the news last week that the National Security and Civil Defense Corps is planning to train vigilantes to target 821,000 vulnerable schools. That would be nice if they do it. I hope they do it. And so to the second part of my job, which is the formal education to preserve diaspora culture. Again, I ask, why should we care? I'm not sure everybody connects, but I know that I connected with the film Wakanda Forever. So there was this sense of pride and the confidence that it gave me. And I think that is what happens when you know that where you come from, there are also things to write home about on them. So we should care about preserving the diaspora culture in the host countries, because it will help the diaspora youth to develop a strong sense of identity and pride. It will also help to foster intercultural understanding and tolerance. So sometimes the only thing people in the developed world hear about Africa, for example, is it's a poor nation, very hungry people dying, corruption. But when they start understanding that there this intercultural knowledge being shared, is that there are also old civilizations from Africa and all of that, then it will help them to be more tolerant. It will also help us to appreciate cultural diversity, and this will contribute to social cohesion and harmony. Very importantly, it will help in preservation of diaspora languages and empower the students to challenge stereotypes and misconceptions. Now, how can we ensure that the formal education preserves diasporan culture? We can provide language instruction in diaspora languages. So this I have been part of. I volunteer for the Ottawa Catholic School Board to instruct Igbo language to kids on Saturdays. I must commend the Canadian government for giving its support. Here in Ottawa, there are a lot of languages, Yoruba, Igbo, Chinese, Swahili. A lot of languages are formally supported and instructed to children virtually and in person. This is one way to preserve diaspora culture. We could organize cultural events, heritage festivals, and extracurricular activities and fairs. Again, this month is Black History Month. There's almost every 2 days I've had to attend one Black History Month event or the other. And you see even the white Canadians and some other Asians attend these events and hear about the Black history and Black culture. These are good ways to preserve diaspora culture. Again, some schools host some events and festivals and fairs where people showcase their culture, and that is very, very commendable. You could organize intercultural exchanges and field trips to museums, because when you get to museums, you're able to tell the stories of what you find there. If you see a Bini bronze, for example, it gives you the opportunity to tell the story. You could include diverse perspectives, histories, and cultural contributions in curricula and textbooks. So yes, they teach history, but they also teach world history. In teaching world history, you should be able to make some references to some of African history, and you should be able to tell the children in the class to share their experiences. That way, they will be able to talk about their culture. You could also provide resources and mentoring. I think the Ottawa Catholic School Board also does that to help them integrate multicultural education. Now we're back to Emeka and Maya. So my point is that if we're able to use the non-formal education system to get Emeka enrolled into the Igbo apprenticeship system of business, Emeka will grow up to become somebody that can contribute to national development and nation building, just like someone like Innocent that we know. Innocent went through the same system. Someone like Koscharis Motors, he went through this system. And today he's an employer of labor and he's doing very well as a businessman. If we also get the diaspora culture into the formal education of for example, the Canadian educational system, we'll find out that someone like Maya would have a self-esteem. She will not be easily intimidated. She will have something to talk about her culture. I remember in one of the classes I taught the kids, it was after Halloween. So I taught to teach them about masquerades. It was the closest thing we had to Halloween. And when I mentioned that the masquerades are it's the boys and men that can engage with masquerades and all of that. It was very funny to find a lot of the boys this time around advocating and asking questions as to why the girls shouldn't get involved. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you are in Canada, this is the culture, but back home, no way. The men and the boys are the ones that talk to masquerades. And so that was a cultural awareness that they had to deal with. So in conclusion, I'm just going to say that we should be more intentional and strategic in engaging with inclusive learning, inclusive by reaching marginalized and underserved groups, and inclusive by also trying to make it comfortable for immigrant children. We should value both formal and non-formal education because they both contribute to national development. And if we integrate diaspora culture in formal education in the host countries, we'll find out that it will foster intercultural understanding and contribute to the rich tapestry of diversity. Those are my some of my references, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ezirigwe Jane. Thank you for that submission. Let me quickly, before we move on, let me quickly read a comment that we have here from Adebowale Adebayo, who joined us from Facebook. 1 minute. Okay. Adebowale Adebayo said, I think Nigeria should go the Israel way, which you're trying to explain. But for now, formalizing non-formal education is not feasible. The Igbo entrepreneurship and apprenticeship should be modified and copied. But the most realistic is for the parent of every home to insist consciously in training their children in the profession of the father and or the mother. This doesn't stop the parent from sending their children to formal schools to study what the child truly wishes to study. By this, the child is developing too. He has another comment, which is what we are experiencing now in Nigeria is that non-educated skilled workers are faring better than higher institutions graduates. It's because practical skills are more appreciated than theoretical graduates. Expatriates in Nigeria have no patience for curriculum vitae, but what they see you can do. Immigration lottery prefers skilled workers than those with high educational qualifications. Okay, so that was from Adebowale Adebayo. Thank you for that contribution. We'll move next to the next speaker. Thank you, Dr. Jane, once again for your presentation. Thank you. The take home there is that we can do more, we can be intentional, and we can be strategic in this. I can see Dr. Coming. Sorry, I'm mixing it up here. I can see our next speaker, Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi, on the screen. Engineer Michael, you're welcome. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so you have 30 minutes to take us on your presentation.
Yeah, I do not have much of a presentation, but a series of interjections, I would say. It's a pleasure to join all of you this evening, and thanks once again to the DSRI for hosting this. I think it's an important national conversation, especially when it relates to human development. And why is that important? Is because I believe, like I always say, anytime I have an opportunity to speak in a public forum, that the most important resource, and Nigerians and even Africans wants to say that, oh, Nigeria or Africa is blessed with so much wealth and natural resources and fertile land and trees. And I always tell them that, and I try to remind us that the most important resource we have as a country is not what is below our feet. It is what is above our necks. We're a country blessed with over 200 million higher than average intelligent people. You just need to visit any village in Nigeria or any farm. I'm a farmer. I own a couple of ranches in this country, and witness the innovation of an uneducated, at least in our own sense, village child around technology. On my ranch, Owonikoko Ranch in Kefi in Nasarawa State, when we first established the ranch about 7 years ago, and we've not had grid power, we've not tried to connect grid power, we just wanted to build a ranch without any of the modern entrapments. Lo and behold, a young man called Dugara, who finished GSS 3 and works on the ranch, came up to me and told me that he can develop a power generator for the ranch. And I told him, how much do you need? He said, I just need 50,000 naira, sir. I'll go down to Panteka, which is down the road, and I'll buy me an old 1991 Toyota Celica engine, and I will build a generator for the ranch. Lo and behold, I gave him 50,000 naira. He came back for me 10,000 naira extra. And I had a 20 kilowatt generator that was running very silently on an old Celica generator on the ranch, built by him with his own hands. And that tells me that the intelligence of the Nigerian, the capacity of the Nigerian to solve any problem, to survive any potential problem on its path, is what ranks us as easily one of the most talked about country in the world. Regardless of the fact that we're not the richest, we are not the most accessible, but yet every conversation, even in the diaspora, in the more developed countries, is dominated by the discussion about this enigma called the Nigerian. The Nigerian does not see restrictions where other people see it. The Nigerian rises above any challenges. In fact, the word that is synonymous to the Nigerian is resilience. And it's special. That is a national resource. And that's why today I'm going to speak not about the problems. I'm not going to even so much talk about the solution. I'm going to be speaking about going on the offense, messaging right, using data to drive national development. I have to say that the Nigerian suffers the worst publicity in the world. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because we are the worst critic of ourselves. I just need to witness the last AFCON, which I was privileged to witness the third place and the final match in Abidjan, to understand how online, on Twitter, on Instagram, it's like every country was targeting the Nigerians, despite the fact that the Nigerians target themselves even more than the other countries. We have an image in the world that is unfortunately driven by a perpetual cycle of negativity that is often driven and started by ourselves, but often by also spurious, unfounded, wrong data. Many of the problems that we confront as a nation is not unique to us. Nigeria is a young country. And I will say that in many ways, those of us who happen to be living in the first 60, 70 years might still not have witnessed the most transformational leadership that Nigeria will ever witness, because when I'm always reminded that Abraham Lincoln, who is regarded as the greatest American president and the most transformational that I ever lived about 70, 80 years into the life of the country, and Nigeria is still not 70 to 80 years old. So those of us who are privileged to be alive today really should look at it as a privilege that we can shape this country, this land, whose destiny serves as sort of like a trigger for the rest of the Black race, and make it a home that we all can be proud of. It is also true that some of the problems we confront, either around investment, education, life expectancy, and employment, becomes more difficult for us to solve when we propound the wrong data and statistics and give the wrong image or impression about our country. For example, for a very long time, Nigeria used the wrong data when it comes to unemployment. I was one of those people that always advocated and always said this was wrong. And this had consequential impacts on investment in Nigeria. While the rest of the world measured unemployment by the number of hours that you worked and said, if you did not work 1 hour a week, then you're unemployed. For 40 years, the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics continues to use the standard of you need to work 40 hours a week to be regarded as employed. So if you work 39 hours, Nigeria will put you in the bracket of being unemployed. But in the United States, if you worked 1 hour, the United States government, Ghanaian government, South African government, every other government in the world, ILO, defined employment as having worked 1 hour a week. It was not until last year that the NBS changed the data. And suddenly, the employment rate of Nigeria that used to be measured as 38%, and which we will compare the employment of Nigeria with that of Ghana, with that of Ivory Coast, with that of Senegal, with that of Ethiopia. They were ranking 15%. We were calling out 38%, 40% because we were using a different standard and we were not correctly positioned in that data. Fell down to 3%. And everybody in Nigeria, even online, on Twitter, Instagram, everybody said, oh, the government is using the wrong data, is a lie. And I always ask them, I come from a decent-sized town in Ekiti, about 20, 30,000 people in Oduoro, Ekiti, in the Ikole local government. I visit home 6-7 times a year. So I'm one of those Nigerians that never really, I don't like staying in the city. I'm a village boy. I never lived in Lagos I never visited Lagos until I attended University of Lagos. I got admission at the age of 15. So for first 15 years of my life, I never saw Lagos. I don't know what it looks like. So I always go back to my hometown every now and then. And I always say, when I go home on the weekday, I struggle to find anybody. When I call the young people and I say, where are you? They say, oh, I'm on the farm. I'm in the market. I'm this. So the question to me always was, where are the unemployed? Because of the enterprising nature of the Nigerian, it will have been impossible for Nigeria to have a 38% unemployment rate. Rather, what you had was seasonal unemployment, underemployment, people spending time they should rather have been using for higher productive activities in the parking lot. Underpayment, so we had issue of wages. So in many ways, while we were solving for chronic unemployment, 38% of the country, if it is unemployed, is chronic unemployment. And the way you attack that is by going about mass employment strategies, agriculture, massive construction. The way you go about solving that problem is different from structural underemployment, which you need to tackle by looking at issues around engagement, productivity, and higher wages. So in 40 years, we were solving for the wrong problems. We were taking the wrong solution to solve a different problem because we had the wrong data. And then we also painted our country in a light that was not attractive to investment. Let us take the other issue. For one, nobody invests in a country where unemployment is 38%. But if you are a country with 3%, 4%, which we are now, unemployment, it looks a lot more attractive. For a very long time, Nigeria refused to rebase our economy. And we're ranked, some interesting ranks across the world. And then suddenly we decided to call our statisticians together. We were like, let's report this data. What is the real GDP of Nigeria? And suddenly we went from 5th GDP in Africa to the biggest GDP in Africa. And we saw the impact of that on employment, on investment, and everything that happened around between 2010 and 2014. Data matters. Messaging matters. Another example is that of power. I happen to be an electrical engineer. I have an engineering and construction company, invest in renewable energy and all of that good stuff. And for a long time, I always wondered how a $500 billion economy could be said to be running on 3,000 megawatts of electricity. It is not possible. It's simply not possible. No matter how much you think you are resilient, an economy of that size cannot run on 3,000 megawatts of electricity. So we had a data problem. The data problem was simple, and I began to interrogate this data problem when I sat on the board of the Rural Electrification Board. And the Rural Electrification Agency, on which I sat as one of the board members, had already put grid of over 1,500 megawatts in our rural areas out there. And I asked them, is this 1,500 megawatts part of what you report to NERC and NERC report as part of the national stock? They said no. And then I investigated further. Mr. Dangote, in 2 or 3 of his industrial plants, produces about 10,000 megawatts. The new refinery itself is about 4,000 megawatts. Shell, ELF, all of these guys that are producing oil and gas installations that I used to support in my days in Exxon and Wally Partners, we all have power supply. And it is not tied to the national grid. Bonny Island, this is part of Nigeria. Last I checked, if you try to take the territory of Bonny Island, you will be attacking the Nigerian territory. It's not part of the national grid. And Bonny Island by itself produces about 4,000 megawatts. So why are we reporting that our national grid or Nigeria carries 3,000 megawatts of electricity? No investor will come into an economy with 3,000 megawatts of electricity, knowing fully well that they will not be able to power even if they're able to get their own power. The republic or the industrial base is getting less than 3,000 megawatts for 200 million people. Then the production and the ability to buy or to be able to patronize their business is very low. So they will stay back. Again, the problem we should be solving is how do we get all of these segregated grid, non-grid produced power onto some kind of pooled grid where we can then distribute efficiently. So Nigeria had a grid problem, not a production or a power production problem. We went about even spending $16 billion based on this wrong data on the so-called NIPP project in solving our generation problem because we had the wrong data. Nigeria doesn't have a generation problem, as I've already proven to you. I can easily show you where Nigeria has about 40,000, 50,000 megawatts of electricity, but they are not pooled. They are inefficiently distributed. They are inefficiently transmitted. It is a different problem. Wicked problems require wicked data, clear data to solve them. Now, the one that actually pains me the most personally as a Nigerian, by the way, of all of these, I'm giving 3 examples, maybe this is a 4th example of wrong data. Now we have messaged wrongly, and therefore we are solving the wrong things. Is this issue of Nigerian currency? You see, the Ghanaians are so very excited to drag the Nigerian on Twitter. So, oh, your currency is so bad. You know, your currency is exchanging over 1,600. And I look, oh, wow. The Naira was introduced 6 months after the cedi in the 1970s. You can go and check the data yourself. And then the cedi locked up 4 zeros. Today, the cedi exchanges for 22, which means that the cedi is actually exchanging for 220,000. Do the data. And we are still exchanging for 1,400. Why is your economy or your currency is totally seen as worse than that of the cedi? I visited Korea the other day, 1,300 to $1. That's what the currency valuation thing does not matter if you are producing what you need. And no, a Ghanaian should not drag me. Their currency is exchanging the same, if we're basing it about the same day in 1970 that we founded. Their Naira, our Naira, their cedi, their currency is exchanging for almost 22 times. 100 times, sorry, 220 times, sorry, of what the Nigerian currency is currently exchanging for, relative to $1. It is all about messaging. And we as Nigerians always get the messaging wrong. Nigeria is not in its worst era ever as a country. Our GDP had risen from $80 in 1960 to $2,800 in 2023. The number of universities we have in our country has risen from 1 to almost 200 in 2023. We have the largest economy in Africa, the 2nd largest per capita income in ECOWAS. Our economy is responsible for 50% of ECOWAS output, economic output. Nigeria had barely 10,000 educated people in 1960. We have over 33 million of them today who have university education. Nigeria's university has produced Nobel laureates. Very few African countries, even those with better rankings, can claim the same. We've produced many award winners, both in the literary area as well as in the scientific area. We have produced giants in science, in technology. Nigeria's fintech rule the world. We have a Flutterwave that currently supports Uber, Taxify. The behind it, Mr. Agbola was educated in Obafemi Awolowo University just about 20 years ago, just like me. What we do very badly is the messaging that underpins national pride and national development. Because if people believe in themselves, then they cannot solve hard problems. Nigeria's life expectancy is not at its lowest. At independence, the life expectancy of Nigeria was 33 years old. Just last year, Nigeria's life expectancy grew from 2015 to 2022 from 53.2 years to 55.1 years. And that number actually varies very widely when you look at the regions. If you are from southwest, southeast, and south of Nigeria, your life expectancy is about 60 years old, which compares very well with the likes of Saudi and Thailand and the rest of them. Messaging does matter. And again, I go back to this issue that you cannot solve big problems as a country if you do not have national pride and national confidence. There are only two countries in the world that have managed to build a national capital in the last 100 years, Nigeria and Brazil. Abuja is a lively city. I live here. I chose to live here by just coming to Nigeria after I left Nigeria for 13 years and decided, okay, I'm coming back home. I did my survey of the cities of Nigeria and I decided I'm coming back to Abuja. It's a city of about 4 to 5 million people today. The other is Brasilia in Brazil. Every other country that have tried it, even Egypt that just recently tried it is not easy to have a living capital city. Yamoussoukro, the one about the capital that Congo tried to build outside of Kinshasa. And I can name many countries who have failed in the same enterprise Nigeria has succeeded in. So if we have to look at ourselves to say, we as a country can feed ourselves, increase productivity of farming from the current level of 1.5 tons per hectare, which is sincerely rubbish, to 10 tons, 15 tons, because we built a national capital before, and we are living in it. You have to look at your previous challenges and what you have surmounted, and then look and project into the future to say, I can solve it because I've done something big. So if we do not focus and we do not target getting the data right and ensuring that we improve national confidence, some of these problems and the things, the solutions that we're talking about today are just going to remain as problems we come and rehash over and over again. Building national confidence is about using the right data, solving the right problem, and also taking pride in the problems that you have solved in the past. Today, I just landed from the city of Lagos. I was commenting to everybody. I don't like Lagos because I think Lagos is crowded and all of that stuff. The very reason why the national capital was built in Abuja. But surprisingly, the roads in Lagos today was much more passable than ever. And I kept asking people the question, where's the traffic? And everybody kept telling me, we now have a rail line. Blue line up, red line coming. The traffic has been evacuated. Big problem, big solution, solved by Lagos State government. But we cannot have the confidence to solve those problems unless we use the right data. And which brings me to the right data around education. Where are we with education for real? A country of less than 1% literacy rate in 1960 currently has a literacy rate of about 77.62%. Compares very favorably to the large nations of the world with the same wicked problem in 1960. Not bad, could be better. Between 2010 and 2021, the literacy rate of Nigeria grew by 13.9%. On a year-on-year basis, that's about 0.13%. That will mean that the leap or the progress we made from 1960 to 2020 will take us 120 years if we're going to get to close to 99% literacy rate. Meaning that the progress in literacy has slowed. That is the right way to look at that data. The wrong way to look at the data is, oh, Nigeria is so poor, illiterate, nobody is in Nigeria. We are going to be solving the wrong problem. Another data that is of concern and should be of concern to you and I. We have over 15 million children at the primary school level that is out of school, that are not in school at all. That is the future generation of terrorists. That's the future generation of miscreants. That's the future generation that will torment us. Whether we get developed, get power, that's the future generation that will go and blow up the power line. That data is what should be concerning. And why should it be concerning? Because the reality in Nigeria also is education is not a federal issue alone. It's a concurrent issue. A local government, Nigeria does not have one government. And I keep saying this again as a reminder about positioning the data. Maybe because I'm just a data person, an engineer, naturally, I will continue to emphasize the numbers. Nigeria has at least 801 governments, 774 constitutional local governments. I use constitutional because we also have LCDAs that are now a lot across many states. Almost every state now has an LCDA that are not necessarily recognized in the constitution. 36 state governments, making it 800, right? And the government of the Federal Capital Territory, making it 801. And then the federal government of Nigeria, making it 802. Each of these governments have responsibility for one level of education or the other. But the most important level of education is in the custody of our state and local government, which is the primary education. Why is it the most important? We cannot build anything on nothing. An absence of basic primary education means you have lost a permanent pool of human beings to penury of illiteracy and lack of knowledge, especially in the modern data age. In order for us to bridge these 15 million or so children that are stuck uneducated out of school, we need to then re-emphasize the allocation of our education capital. Capital is scarce. If you have 100 naira, there's going to be always 500 naira problem for you to solve. You know that, I know that. As personal, in our personal budget as well as our corporate budgets. But are we using our education budget in the right place? I know we get excited. I heard Professor had said earlier on, oh, the university ranking. No. University really education is for the elites. We, as government, of local government, of state government, should be emphasizing spending money to get these 15 million children to school. Let's train them how to read and write in their local language, in English, how to read science. It is that which would transform the country over the next decade. If you look at Nigeria's life expectancy statistics, it correlates directly with the education literacy data across all of those states. 4 states, Cross River, Ekiti, Imo, and Ogun, who also happens to have the highest literacy rate in Nigeria, have the highest life expectancy of 59.6 years. The lowest ranking states that have the lowest life expectancy are Sokoto and Zamfara. And they also have the lowest level of literacy rates. What that tells me is that these regional differences, there's a correlation between what we expend on education and how long people live. But those regional differences were also there because of historical spending on public education. The southwest of Nigeria, including many parts of the south-south, benefited from the free education policy of the first regional government of 1952 to 1958. And that has created a permanent gap. The eastern region quickly course-corrected in 1956, but even that gap still exists. So we now need to now go to our current government and say, local government, Mr. Local Government, Mr. State Government, how can we quickly incentivize getting these children back to school so that we do not have 15 million children looking for jobs that does not exist in the next 10, 20 years? Children that are permanently out of the internet. Do you know what it means not to be able to read the internet? Because you are illiterate. How can we solve for those problems? Now I will end this in the last 4 minutes I have, or 5 minutes I have, by speaking to the way forward. First, can we get data? I think a lot of Diaspora and a lot of the work I've been doing in country, either in venture capital and power, even in public policy and sustainable development, has been around how do you improve data collection and how do you take sentiment out of data interpretation, because you can still get the data right, and then you can still look at the cup in the you say half full, half empty, and then you can still end up at the rubbish conclusion if you put sentiment into data interpretation. The diaspora can begin to question every data that they see on the internet, because I will tell you, the interesting thing is that you will be surprised the kind of political as well as historical discrimination that is behind some of the data you see. I was in Nigeria in 2016 when the data around Nigeria hosted the highest number of poor people came out. And I saw how the development community, manned mostly by foreigners, were so excited about that number and about that reality. You would think that they just found gold. Oh, they were very happy to say, oh, Nigeria host them. You know what? It means more work for them. It means more grants for them. It means they would stay in Nigeria 20, 30 years longer. Their mortgage will get paid off faster in their home country. And they were ready for Nigeria to propagate this gospel. And we took it on the internet and ran with it. And when it came to 2018, when Nigeria went back to number 2 and India took back the position, Nigerians have still refused to drop it. Nigeria does not, let me say it loud, the highest number of poor people in the world is in India. And I'm going to India tomorrow. It's not in Nigeria. Yes. We continue to create an industry of, I call it an industry of desperation for ourselves. And when we turn ourselves to the capital of desperation, the world will come and feast on you. Let us question the data. Let us question the source of the data. Let us question who is giving the data. Let us gather data. Let us analyze it. That data starts from who is the Nigerian. And I have to commend the government, both the previous one and the current one, the work they are doing on national identification policy, the NIN. Because for far too long, we just didn't know who the Nigerian was. Everybody can just claim to be a Nigerian and they are Nigerian. And the data was always, you will see, they will say, oh, Nigeria is 220 million. But now we are getting there. At least the NIN database now has, the last I saw it, about 180 million. And we are close. We will be close to where we will be able to identify every Nigerian with their fingerprint, which means that you have something unique identification. And it's now being tied to everything. Passport, driver license, everything now in Nigeria you have to get your NIN attached to it. And that is great. It's part of data collection. Because without good data, the messaging is going to be wrong. And with bad messaging, we can destroy confidence. And with confidence destroyed, you can ensure that bad problem or storm problem will remain permanently wicked problems. The second thing we need to look into in terms of the way forward is that we need to be honest to ourselves about the historical gap in development between the far north, especially the northwest and the northeast, and the rest of the country. We have failed as a group of people to interrogate and accept our history for what it is. And some people boil it down to history not being taught in school. I do not accept. I just think that Nigerians have a way of avoiding discussing difficult issues. We know that the North has historically underinvested in education, especially basic education. But we also know that the North has a strength in Islamic education. How do we combine, and taking the insights that were shared by a doctor that had the presentation before me, how do we turn the North to the powerhouse of technical education? Nigerians today, we import tilers. We import people that are plumbers. Plumbing is everything we import. I say it now that our parents used to import umbrellas and mirrors. We are importing tiles and everything else. We need to turn what seemingly looks like a weakness into a strength. The low-cost labor of the North, the seemingly illiterate population can quickly be revolutionized with adult education and technical education combined together, and use that as a strength to export. We can export the labor of the North to go and build Dubai, to go and build the next Dubai and the next Abu Dhabi, and turn it into cash. But that will take an intense focus on accepting the fact that we have a problem in the North. Because if we take out the data of the Northwest and the North-South and the Northeast, Nigeria's education statistics and human development statistics will jump from that of a below average country to a country of above average. That is the reality. Go and take the data. If you doubt me, go and take the data and pass it. That is what you're going to get. So we, as a people, as the central government, state government, we need to, if we do not bridge the northern education gap, then Nigeria has a problem, because it's going to show up in our data, which will impact our messaging. The third, we need to now prioritize where that money goes. Like I said, let's prioritize basic education. It is on top of basic education that you build other education. Let's improve the quality of public basic education, because that is improving public goods. If we deploy a lot of our cash into ensuring we have superb, fantastic primary schools and basic and junior secondary schools across the country, where the children of the poorest, even my driver and my house girl, can go to the same school of the same qualities as my own children in private school, then it ensures that the next generation will only get better and better. Improving that quality, ensuring quality education at the basic level, while now connecting the industry and businesses to funding post-tertiary, post-secondary education, where they now their needs, is very, very critical. Today, there's a disconnect. ASU goes to war over issue around financial autonomy of universities, over increasing the fees. How can I went to school in University of Lagos, and in University of Lagos, they are still paying equivalent of less than $20 an annum to educate a medical student. An annum, $20 to educate a medical student. And we wonder why that medical student immediately gets his certificate and he can earn $200,000, jumps on a plane and goes away. We need to link education funding to outcomes. Industry, there, focus on university. Government, focus very intensely on basic. We'll produce industry, we educate people for their own needs. We'll put in scholarship schemes and grants to support the industry to create insanely great universities and then cater for them. And then lastly, we have to look at solving the real problems we have, having done all of these things. What are national problems? I see people will talk, oh, our national problem is that we do not have infrastructure. Well, I've traveled 49 countries. India is going to be my 50th. I leave tomorrow. I'll tell you, Nigeria does not have the worst infrastructure. I've been on the road between Douala and Yaoundé before. Single lane road, trailer facing me at 9 p.m. at night. I've been in rooms across different countries across Southeast Asia before. And I look at the infrastructure they have, and I say, Nigeria has a very decent infrastructure. That is not our problem. Our problem is building that infrastructure and maintaining it. Now, the conversation can change. Our real problems, productivity, especially food productivity, agricultural productivity. Our real problem, rapid urbanization. I hear somebody talk about insecurity. Nigerians' crime data is actually quite low for 220 million people, my people. That's the truth. For 220 million people, we have no crime. Because crime is based on the number of people you have everywhere in the world. You can turn on your US TV or your Canadian TV any day, and you can see the number of shootings that happen. If I have 1/10 of that shooting in Abuja, the president of Nigeria will cut off his head. Nigeria does not have a crime problem. Neither do we have insecurity problem the way we claim it. What we do have, aside from the messaging part, is that we are rapidly urbanizing. So we know a country which in 1984 was 20% urban and 80% rural. That country today is now 50-50. 50% urban, some people will say 52% urban, 48% rural. What that happens is a social disconnection. And what created that rapid urbanization? State creation. Every state capital became an urban area. I am from today. Ado-Ekiti, Ikole-Ekiti, Kere-Ekiti, all of them are now townships. And the traffic is intense. No goats can sleep on that road again. So there's now a shift from a rural economy to an urban economy. And as a result, there's a consequential social disconnect. And so a lot of us who grew up in an era of no news about crime on our TV, no news about any kind of issue, and then suddenly we get one or two news and we're insecure. Psychologically, yes. But data, no. But your real problem is the rapid urbanization and in-attendant increase of social linkages to manage that. We need an infrastructure for urbanization. I mean, social infrastructure for urbanization. These are the real problems of Nigeria, instead of us focusing on the wrong problems because we are using the wrong data and then messaging wrongly. I hope these have helped, at least some of these my interjections, but I hope that we begin as the members of the enlightened diaspora that happen to definitely will hold a lot of the most educated, most literate, most well-traveled, most exposed Nigerians to begin to question some of the basic premises of some of our assertions about our national development and begin to build a new narrative, knowing fully well that we are privileged to be living in the first 100 years of our country, to build a country that our future generations of Nigerians and Black people can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Michael Uluwagbemi. Thank you so much for those submission. And the take home is Engineer Michael Uluwagbemi stressed on the need to prioritize public basic education in ensuring quality education in Nigeria. Well, at this juncture, we have gotten to almost the end of the program. We have gotten to the question and answer segment. And I don't know, I may be directing some of the questions I have here to each of our speakers. So I would like this first question would be for Professor Damilola Olawumi. So Professor, are you with us, sir? The Nigerian education standard has collapsed. Okay, thank you so much. I'm directing this question to you. And if any of the speakers also have something to say to buttress your answer, we wouldn't mind that. So the Nigerian education standard has collapsed so much that parents now spend billions of dollars as school fees and allowances for their children and works to study in Europe or even in neighboring countries like Benin Republic, like Ghana, and the likes. So, what can be done to improve the quality of education and structure of the Nigerian school to meet the needs of industry and the society?
Thank you very much. It's a good question, and it's been really great listening to the insightful presentations of the speakers. I think Engineer Oluwagbemi has been very optimistic, more optimistic than anyone I've met lately. And it's good to have that strong spirit of optimism and patriotism for our country. But I think, the academics are normally looking at the problems, focusing more on the problems in order to propose solutions, you see. Because the day we say that everything is fine, that is when the nation starts to stagnate. So we look at our analysis is always focused on problems and what we can solve. Now, the problem you've described about children getting young people, more young people in school, is one of those complex problems. It's not, and like the engineer said, it depends on what part of the country you are in. I think in the north, it's always a struggle getting kids to embrace formal education, while in the south, it is not as much of the lack of interest by the parents to take them to school. It's always a question of resources. It's also a question of the quality of our institutions. No matter how we look at it, only very of our few institutions can compete with global standards, whether the public or even the private. Many of the private schools that charge exorbitant fees do not meet the basic threshold of public schools abroad. That is the reality, as harsh as it is. So in the South, it is a question of resources, infrastructure, getting, providing institutions that match up with best standards, as well as providing scholarships for people from not so well-to-do backgrounds to be able to go to school. While in the North, you start to use strategies like, school feeding program, which the current administration has been implementing just to incentivize going to school. So I think you get the drift. It depends on what part of the country you are in. So my messaging to the government will be to accelerate such strategies, both in the North and the South, to create the right environment for children to learn. You cannot say we don't have a problem when school kids are being kidnapped, in buses, when they are going to school. That is not made up. It is the reality of Nigeria. So if the security problem is not addressed, if people don't feel safe to go to school, if our girls that were kidnapped many years ago are not found, those are problems that need to be addressed. And if we address them, then schooling will become attractive even for those in the North as well as in the South. So I still go back to the issue of creating the right environment for education to thrive. And the last point I'll make on that point is also creating a merit-based system. The problem in Nigeria is that even when you have gone to school, you have a university degree, it doesn't translate to anything. You might never find a job. So there's no merit. Merit is at least celebrated in the country, and so if we are producing more graduates than, again, like I said, one can be optimistic and say, okay, fine, we have more universities, but what's happening to those graduates? How many of them can find job? How many of them can use their degrees? How many of our educated people are actually being equipped to practice their profession? So that creating a merit-based system, of course, that de-emphasizes formal education, but including vocational training, such that those that have these degrees or training can actually use them for their livelihood. But a situation whereby you have graduates being paid peanuts, that does not really incentivize anyone to go along that path. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay,
Yeah,
so
can I
Dr.
quickly
Dave.
tackle
Yes,
something?
sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
sir.
a lot of times, we need to ask ourselves: are we educating for the world, or we're educating to solve our own problem? A lot of my own friends who have sent their children abroad have suddenly realized that the children they've raised are not raised for Nigeria economy. They can't come back. Simply have no part to contribute to Nigeria again. Are you educating your citizens to solve your own problem? And that's the reason we as a country seem to be obsessed with the way we benchmark to the rest of the world when the world does not really care. The Chinese for over 40, 50 years were isolated. And they were solving Chinese problems. And when they opened up to the rest of the world, before the world realized that China had left them, despite any jealousy or envy that the West continued to display towards China. Why do we care that we are not ranked in the world if we are solving the problem of productivity for agriculture in Nigeria? Tropical diseases to be cured, sickle cell that we need to find a solution to. I don't care if my university is not ranked. If I do not put in for the ranking, then I will not be ranked. And that's their business. We must have some national pride and have a sense to be like, look, first thing. I think a lot of Nigeria's problem is that Nigeria was always led by diaspora-minded people. Remember all our First Republic leaders, we're all educated in London, America, all of them. And so we are always saying, are we educating Nigerians for Nigeria? If we're educating Nigeria for Nigeria, will I be putting children to study sociology when I need to solve an engineering problem? I need to put more children to study engineering. These are the kind of questions I'm asking, the difficult questions. I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm saying, does it matter to me if the rest of the world say your college education is not to their own standard? But if it's to my standard and solving my problem, that's what matters. Number two, I have a space for 1 million students in my universities. And I produce 4 million students every year out of secondary school. And there's an overwhelming culture that everybody that goes to secondary school must always go to university. Where do you think the balance of 3 million are going to? They will go to Benin Republic. They will go to Niger. They will go to Egypt. The one that can go to abroad will go abroad if they can afford it. Again, I'm saying, I'm interrogating the data. I'm saying the data is not because the quality of it. Most of those parents that you see sending their children to Benin is because their children did not pass entrance JAMB UTME. I can say it confidently. Because it's very, very competitive. Only 1 out of 4 students that write UTME will get into university in Nigeria because the space is very scarce. And that was because for too long, we emphasized and only allowed public education, public investment in universities until we liberalized that system in 1999. And now the number of universities has risen from 40 to almost 200. But we need more because we might not be a nation that is proficient in many things. We are very proficient in producing babies. And those babies need to be educated. And our investment simply is not catching up enough very fast to create those spaces in universities for them. So yes, they will go. So we should not, the interpretation of the data against is getting us into trouble. Oh, the quality of education is bad, that's why children are going to Benin Republic. No, most of those universities in Benin Republic, for your information, are owned by Nigerians. Even one of them is owned by Asari Dokubo, a Nigerian militant. When you go open a university in Benin Republic to educate Nigerians, check that out. If you doubt me, put it online. Asari Dokubo owns a university in Benin Republic. Because the demand for university education is high. The question is, should the demand for the university education, just like the demand for dollars that we have in Nigeria today, should it be that high if we are truly, truly, truly benchmarking to our problems? Do we have so much need for sociologists, archaeologists, linguists? Is that Nigeria's problem? Don't we have more need for tilers, for plumbers, for people that will build cars, for technicians that will go under my auto vehicles? Are those not more important problems than sociology and linguistics? So if we correctly structure our taste and particularly connect our problem to the solution, then we will correctly ensure that even the scarce resources, the 1 million spaces we have, is optimized for Nigerian problems. And it won't matter whether Nigerians will continue to look for the golden fleece. More than, in fact, I think maybe only the Lebanese and the Jew can compete with us when it comes to our penchants to travel and to see the world. It will not matter. Even if you put gold on the street of Nigerians will continue to travel abroad to look for education. And some of them will not come back. Some of them will stay abroad, but they will still groan about Nigeria. So don't let us make that the problem. The problem is not the quality per se. It is we have a space problem. I have 75% of children that leave university because they tell them that all of them must end up in university. They are looking for space. So they will go to Benin Republic. Of course, they will go to Niger if they can. Abacha's wife set up a university in Niger too, just across the border, because it's easier for them to obtain French license to set up universities. And they educate both the Nigerians and the elites of the Nigerians and the Nigerians, northern Nigerian elites, who now go there. Because the kids maybe don't pass UTME as much as the children of the poor who burn their candlelights to read with lantern. Again, I'm a very acerbic and cynical interpreter of data. Maybe not the right interpretation, but it's one of those things. So the way you're looking at it might not be the wrong way. But let us focus on the solution and the problem and connect it correctly. And that will solve most of these gaps that we are seeing.
All right. Thank you, Engineer Michael. So let me direct this.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I wanted to make a comment, and I thank Dr. Michael, and I like the passion. But I also want us to acknowledge our lived realities. Okay. First and foremost, when you talk about before now, it used to be the children of the rich, the elite, that could travel out to UK or Canada or US to go and get this university education. The reason why the children of the middle class started to access Ghana and some other neighboring countries was because of the failure in the educational system in Nigeria, especially the university educational system. And so when you have children spend 8 months at home, it's not going to be, no parent likes that. And so instead of keeping my child at home for 8 months, doing nothing and risking the likelihood of the person joining bad gangs or something, people just try to send their children abroad. That's a reality. It's not necessarily because people just want to go to shop for education abroad. There's a need, and we agree that there's a need, but that need is because of a failure in our system. And when you talk about, for example, the Chinese trying to shut out the world, I want you to acknowledge the fact that the world is becoming more globalized. It's more of a global village now than it was 40 to 50 years ago. And so the same style and models that were used 40 or 50 years ago may not necessarily work at this point because of IT and more connection that we can access through technologies. So if we have that in mind, then we're not going to be talking about shutting out everybody and trying to do things our own way, because even with the AFCFTA, we are getting more connected, we're opening our doors more, and that is a reality. Again, talking about linguistics and sociology and archaeology, not trying to solve our problems. It may just be that we're not appreciating the kind of problems that those ones can solve. The problems of Nigeria are not going to be solved just by STEM. And I continue to tell people, I'm from the social science background. And when people continue to talk about STEM, you could see that some of the problems we're having now are actually social problems. They're no longer scientific and technological problems. We're having more of social problems that things like psychology, sociology may be able to help us bridge the gap. The world is getting more connected technologically and virtually, but physically in the physical world space, we're having a lot of issues and people's problems that some of these social science courses may be able to solve. I just felt I should make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that submission. So the next question, our time is far spent. With the next question, I would like to direct it to Engineer Michael. Engineer Michael, since 1999, successive governments have failed to adequately engage the diaspora in nation building, especially in terms of education. And 25 years down the line, there's been no headway at all. How much impact do you think the diaspora can make in our education system if the environment is made conducive?
I think we Nigerians like to use very broad statements. My engineer training will not accept some of the statement that is made in the question. You have to support it with data.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
I said my engineering training that will be demanding data will not accept some of the premise of the question, because I will be demanding data. When you say since 99 that government have not engaged with diaspora, I think it's wrong, because I remember the Obasanjo administration had the NIDO organization, even came to the United States and we engaged with them. I believe in that.
Failed to adequately.
Well, what is adequate? I mean, these are very vague terms. Who defines adequate? Every president gets into office since 99 does almost a required tour of major cities where Nigerians live and engage with them, even this current one. Nigeria has also called the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, that is now a full-fledged commission approved by the National Assembly that caters to the diaspora. I don't think there's any country that has invested in the diaspora as much as Nigeria has in the last 10, 20 years. I can say that, make that statement as well. A full-fledged agency, fully funded by the federal government of Nigeria. I mean, I'm not standing in defense of them. I'm saying that some of the assertions, sometimes we make some very interesting assertion about public policy without actually asking the other question that maybe that assertion is not right. So I will be the one to point you out and say, maybe that assertion you're making about engagement of the diaspora is not correct. I think the government actually has been increasingly engaging diaspora since 1999. It started first with just having a diaspora committee in the House of Reps, then chaired by the same woman who now heads the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, which is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It then led into the setting up NIDO, the Nigerian Diaspora Organization, in the United States, in Europe, and then Asia, and regular engagement and town halls. Even recruiting diaspora into government, including the likes of Okojo-Iweala and Ekwesili and the rest of them, who were overseas, and they brought them back home under the then presidents of Obasanjo and co. And now today you have a full-fledged commission. The diaspora actually have diaspora summits and conferences and engagement. I just think we should stop looking to government to solve all our problems. That's what I would say. As Nigerians, you have a responsibility. When you carry that passport, it's a privilege. I would tell people. There are many people in the world who are stateless, but to come from the biggest black nation on earth, easily the most economically prosperous black nation that the world has ever known in terms of GDP. There's no black nation that have had the GDP Nigeria have ever had in the history of the world. The richest black nation in the history of mankind. Unless, of course, we try to measure Mansa Musa's gold, which is fabled, and I've not seen it. But in modernity, no black nation has risen to this level of wealth. It's a privilege. 1 out of every 5 black persons, 6 black persons in Nigeria, 1 out of every 5 African. So we have we hold that green passport. And our work is to understand that the even bigger privilege is that any of us have education. 7% of the world has a university education. I'm sure almost everyone on this call has a university education. We are elites of the elites, even by global standards. And when you are elites of the elites, the onus is on you. It's not what can Nigeria give you. It's what can you give Nigeria. Leave what Nigeria can give you. Nigeria has helped you to where you are. What are you leaving for Nigeria? You are in the top 7% of the world. And part of that was in Nigeria, whether you like it or not. So what can you contribute to Nigeria? Not, what can the government do for the diaspora? What can the diaspora, this issue of data, for example, why are we not coming together to solve it? It's a stubborn problem. Maybe the insights of those people who are in the war front on ground trying to solve the problem cannot allow them to even have a clear head to interpret data. Maybe it's our own work, our own role to crowdsource data, to interpret it and present alternative data to what those people with an agenda might be presenting that might be confusing what the problem is and what the solution should be. I think we should be asking ourselves, like Jeff Kennedy has said, not what Nigeria can do for you, what we can do for Nigeria.
All right. Thank you. So the last question, what are the factors mitigating against the diaspora towards the advancement of education in Nigeria? Engineer Michael?
Oh, is that for me? Okay, you were not clear. Okay. So the question is, what are the factors mitigating against the participation of the diaspora?
Yes, in the advancement of education in Nigeria.
Yeah, I think the number one factor is what I actually have said, the messaging. A lot of diaspora, unfortunately, when I discuss with them, I lived there for 13 years myself, and I still have a home in the US and Canada, and I come regularly. All my siblings are over there. And the first thing I realized very quickly is that the data we are transmitting and the messaging we are transmitting scares even the most optimistic diaspora. And the thing is that if you cannot, that messaging problem, 1, can dissuade help coming from the right place. 2, can ensure the wrong help comes for the, it's like they say, if you have an headache and you go about combing your hair, you are as close to the problem as you are far away from the solution. You go comb your hair when you have an headache, yes, you are very close to the problem. You're also very far from the solution. And that's the problem when you have wrong data. So how do we ensure? I think that the messaging and perception, because the diaspora is not on ground, whether we like it or not. You are over there, you have your daily work, you see the first news or the first, and if the messaging is wrong, and they tell you that, oh, when you get to the airport in Nigeria, you get kidnapped, why will you even participate? You will run for your dear life because the first instinct of man is survival. So we need to get the messaging right. The second part of it is that there are many policies that are in place, especially at our state and local level, that have not connected the diaspora appropriately. I think most of the diaspora at the subnational level. Nigeria's subnationals control the economy, not the federal government of Nigeria. The federal government of Nigeria have jurisdiction over very few things that affect your daily lives. But your state governor, who is a member of the National Economic Council, controls everything from your economy to your road, to your infrastructure, to employment, to the income tax that you pay. The daily things that affect your life is at the state level. Our state governments are doing a very poor job of connecting to the global pool of resources that Diaspora can provide to them to enable them to lift their state out of poverty and to improve the development. And a lot of these also have to do with the opacity of policies at that level. A lot of people do not know how to even connect to their state. A lot of people do not have a platform to connect to their state of origin or their state of citizenship or where they have residences. And these are issues that I think that we can do more of. Even the diaspora community should advocate more. Let's get involved. And I say this, a lot of the issues that Nigerians have can be solved at our state level. And that's the way we have a federal system of government. But the intense focus on the central that ends up spending just 30% of national revenue and 70% of national revenue. When I say national, I mean internal generated revenue of the state government plus FAC, plus VAT and everything. State government in Nigeria spends 70% of it. And then we keep eating on the federal government that spends 30%. We are supposed to go to our state and focus on the problem and solving the problem at that state level, especially basic education. State government are the one in charge of whether your child will go to school from the age of 0 to the age of 18. And that is where we can solve that problem. Not continue to focus on federal government, whose work is mostly subvention, grants, UBEC, and the rest of them. It has nothing really to do with the actual operation of those primary schools. So these are the two issues, I think, if you ask me just off my head, and ways we can get involved.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Engineer Michael. So there's a question from the comment section from Ogo Eric, and I would like to direct this to Professor, to Dr. Jane, rather. How can we use this meeting to connect in helping others, people that have education intent, just like once upon a time? Dr. Jane, could you please address us on that?
Okay, so how can we use the meeting to help in connecting others? I think the meeting is serving the purpose already. A lot of participants here are more informed. Just like the person asking the question, when you are more informed, you look around your corner and you try to sweep your corner. So there is no uniformed problem or issues around everybody. So it's to look into your community. Yes, there are some basic issues around, but when you look into your community, you could see how you could help. I'm not sure of what the objectives of the initiative is when it comes to working with people in Nigeria. So you may want to shed more light on that. But on the level of community engagement and trying to improve education, I would say even as little as donating used textbooks, that's something I usually do, and I find it very helpful. Sometimes in most cities now, whether you have a textbook or whether a sibling has a textbook or not, once you move to the next class, you will pay for all the books all over again. And so at the end of the day, you will find out that if you have 3 children, you're going to have 3 new general mathematics textbook, for example, or new lantern book. You will find out that you have 3 of it at home because everyone is made to buy it. And so after a while, you find out that you have a huge stack of books somewhere. But those books can be taken and donated to rural communities where kids that don't have access to books can make use of them and then improve their lives. I would probably refer to you to now tell the participants how they can connect, because this meeting, I'm sure the initiative also has its own goals and objectives as to how it can connect with people in Nigeria to move the educational sector forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jane. Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi, somebody has a question for you at the comment section, That's from Adebowale Adebayo. He said, "Thank you, Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi, for your deep analysis. How do we ensure that true data researches and accumulation are not tampered with or manipulated to favor a particular tribe or region or religion in Nigeria?" He said, "That's my question." Over to you, Engineer Michael.
Yeah, the first thing first is thanks so much for the recommendation. The first thing first is open data. I mean, and I think the world is moving towards the era of open data. Once data collection is open and it's being crowdsourced and it's being dumped, and then anybody can go there to play with it, interpret it, then the more transparent data collection is, and the more transparent data analysis is, the less likely it can be manipulated. The second one is build national institutions. I don't think there's a generation of Nigerians that are not one tribe or the other. In fact, I always make a joke that I am the only in my household, at least among my own siblings, I'm the only one that married someone of the same ethnic group as I did. So all my cousins, all my nephews and nieces are mixed breed, so to say. So which tribe are they going to manipulate the data for? So there's a whole generation, a new generation of Nigerians that we are developing under us that does not care about this. They're more likely to say, "Oh, I'm from Warri, I grew up in Warri, I grew up in Lagos, They are more urbanized. And we should strive to build those national institutions. The National Bureau of Statistics does a fantastic job. And I always like to say that over there we have good professionals. They don't get a lot of the praise that they require, but they give very good. I can go to their website, mbs.gov.ng. They give fantastic, and there you can see the source of the data, right? And you can see the raw data which you can use. nigerianstats.gov.ng. That's the website. And you can see that they've built a national platform for data collection and for data analysis. And you can go in there. There are many NGOs, including Budget and the rest of them are going, they analyze, they do infographics, and you just engage the data. That's what I would say. You'll be surprised what you will find out. Instead of the usual things that you see in the public and on social media, which is often the social media, in the words of Professor Wole Soyinka last couple of weeks, when he said it's full of bandits, social bandits. So we've taken banditry now online in Nigeria because we have turned beer parlor talk to the era of the day, and there's no real data that underpins some of our national conversation on there. But if you take a step away and go into statistically data-backed analysis, then you have a better sense of the true direction of the country, of some of the progresses that are made and some of the gaps that exist that you can bridge. And that is when you begin to have productive impact, instead of just dwelling and sinking yourself in lamentations and beer parlor talk that dominate our social discourse, unfortunately.
All right, Engineer Oluwagbemi, there's also another comment from Oma here. She said, "Thanks to Engineer Oluwagbemi for his in-depth analysis. I just want to add that there is a significant need to analyze our education policies and governance structures." What's your take?
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think, like I said, my pointer to China was not to say that we needed to shut our doors to the rest of the world. My point is that we needed to look inward as a country. What kind of education system do we? Because I think that we still have, it's sort of like an hybrid education system that is based almost on the colonial paradigm, educating Nigerians to take on white-collar jobs and to replace the colonial masters. We need to have a national conversation around the kind of education system we have and why are we building it. And then we need to restructure and look at the policies around those education choices we are making. This is a conversation of not just a year or a decade or 2 or 3 decades. In fact, if you recall, if you have studied the American evolution of the American education system, even in the African American community, there was a discussion at one point whether African Americans should be focused on technical education versus book education. It was a fight between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. They had that conversation even in that community. But we have failed to have that conversation because we are just, it's almost like we are nibbling in the dark. What kind of education system does Nigeria need if we want to become a leading top level country in the next, 20, 30, 40 years? How do we use our education system to solve our wicked problems? And then will it matter if that education system is structured this way or that way? And will it matter if we even build our education system at the expense of everybody going into, say, higher education, tertiary education? Do everybody need a university education in Nigeria? Is our universities not turning to the number one or the biggest engine of unemployment? Are we not creating unemployment by sending people to universities? I don't know the answers. I'm just asking the questions. And it is having these conversations and asking these questions that would help galvanize the national conversation. And ultimately, we can then settle on a solution after we start having it. National conversations take time. I'll give you an example. This issue around state police and security. We've had this conversation since 1999, since we got democracy back. For the first time, yesterday, the president of Nigeria, with all the governors, agreed that we needed to have a state police. That conversation took 25 years. We can have an education conversation for the next 25 years before we finally get to the answer. But it is possible. We need to start having a conversation now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're coming to the end of the conference. I would like to ask Professor to give his final remark.
Thank you very much. I think it's been really insightful. Nigeria indeed is not the worst country on earth, but it is also not the best country on earth. When you look at the enormous potential of the country, it has not lived up to its full potential. That's the reality that we cannot shy away from. And back in the days, Nigeria was highly regarded in Africa and in the world for its innovation. So the role of education is for us to then say, how can we get back to those times when the country was known not for fraud, not for producing hush puppies of this world, but for education, for producing the Nobel laureate, Wole Soyinka, for producing Chinua Achebe, for, leading in sports, leading in technology and the likes. And I think a society that wants to progress continues to think that way. One thing I learned living abroad, living in Canada and in other countries, I've lived in all continents of the world. Even when a road is not broken, they try to fix it. And you might say, why are they fixing it? Because they want it to be better. So it's not because they just want to create problems. It's because best is always possible. And that's, I think, that is the spirit we should have and we should imbibe. And I think for us as the diaspora community, it starts by picking on one problem at a time and solving it. No country has perfections. There's no perfect country. But of course, a country that stops to grow is a country that will stagnate. And so if we can take anything away, it is to continue to push for that innovation, for that reform that will create incentives for the diaspora community to play a key role in reforming the country. Let us provide the right incentives for those abroad to be able to play a role, whether by coming back or by investing. Let us remove the barriers. How long does it take to register a company in Abuja, in the Corporate Affairs Commission? Despite all the reforms they've undertaken recently, I acknowledge that, but there are still significant problems. So these are things that I hope we can continue to look at, knowing that we are looking at these problems not because we are the worst country on earth, but we are looking at them with the view to always progress as a nation. And let me end by congratulating the organizers once again, Diaspora Social Responsibility Initiative. It's been really wonderful listening to the wide range of perspectives from the engineer to Dr. Jane and the other commentators. I've learned a lot myself that I hope to apply in my work. So I thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jane, your final submission, please.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think at the end of the day, I would just say that sometimes when we call on government and when it looks like it will look like we're not looking at the roles that individuals can play or private entities can play. But the truth is that the government has the most fundamental role to play when it comes to most of these issues. And that is why we elect the government. It must be able to provide that enabling environment. If the environment is there, you wouldn't even need to invite anybody to do their part. But sometimes it's very frustrating when people want to play their part, but the environment is not very favorable to that. I would say that again, Nigeria is very good with. So when we talk about reviewing policies and reviewing laws, my experience as a researcher is that most times when we go to the books and we'll find out that we have things that should be working, but they are not working. So the problem would always be, why are they not working? And that is why it looks like we're always focusing on the problem, because that is usually the problem. You would see that when you talk about basic education that Engineer Michael tried to highlight, when you talk about even the informal or vocational studies that I tried to talk about, and when you talk about the formal education that Professor Damilola talked about, you will see that there are structures, at least by way of acts establishing and giving mandate to some institutions to carry out these functions. But in reality, you find out that there are still lapses. And so the big question is, how do we get these to work? You may find out that if we go to review the laws, if you may find out that if we go to review the curriculum, at least I know that NUC reviewed its curriculum lately. I contributed to that, and you will find out that it looks so good on the paper, but then when it comes to implementation, that's where we have the problem. And sometimes it's usually because of lack of capacity and the political will to effectively implement. So yes, we all have a role to play. The diaspora has a role to play. The individuals in communities have a role to play. But the government must take the front seat and show that willingness to take us to the next level by creating the enabling environment. And this creating an enabling environment is not just by having laws and policies, but having that political will to implement and the capacity, the human capacity to implement the laws and policies that we have in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jane. Dr. Michael, Engineer Michael, please, your final remarks. Engineer Michael. It's as if Engineer Michael is
Can you hear me?
not.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I
we
was
can
on
hear
mute
you now.
briefly. All right.
Okay. Your final remarks,
Thank you very
please.
much. Thanks. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity once again to join this webinar. Indeed, it has been very insightful, and understanding the different perspectives with respect to education. I really did enjoy the analysis around technical education as well as formal education, and of course, the discussions that we've had on the whole gamut on how the diaspora can be of great benefits to it. My final thought is going to be around I think as a people, we should first and foremost celebrate ourselves a whole lot more. You cannot have the confidence to solve future problems if you do not celebrate the capacity you used to solve the previous ones. And take the lessons learned from the experiences of the past and infuse them to solve the current as well as the future problems. And I also want to say that yes, while it is true that we have government to do that what we cannot do by ourselves, there's no one person that is called government. Rather, government, especially a democratic one, which we have chosen for ourselves, we have chosen democratic federalism. Government at various levels, as I've explained, 802 governments, chosen by popular will. Then we also have an obligation and a responsibility to participate. You cannot complain how the food was cooked if you are not part of those that plucked the ingredients, prepared the ingredients, and made it into the soup. And it is not as difficult as they make it to seem. Those people who participate in this so-called government do not have two heads. And there are various ways you can contribute, right from the level of a political party to the level of even participating in advisory position or contributing to national institutions as facilitators as well as resource persons. Government is not one person, and you'll be surprised the impact you can have in your own little place if you decide to just get interested, even from a distant place. But then I will encourage us, those of us who are diaspora, let's come back home. If home is home and it's of interest, then schedule it. Take the 3-4 weeks break from your workplace, come back to Nigeria and find that place you can contribute. Is it a local university? Professor talked about volunteering as a visiting professor, as a tutor, mentorship and mentoring. Because a lot of times people in government don't do the right thing, not because they are wicked, but because they simply do not have the exposure or don't know how to do it better. And when you show them that better even works for them and even works for the country and makes everybody better, they will do it. So I would plead that we should not throw our hands up and just say government and think government is somebody's father or somebody's son. The person that's in government today is not in government tomorrow. You will be surprised. A joke was not even a joke. It was actually a statement that the former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo made. And he said one day he had gone to the office and he had been requesting for an iPad since when he became vice president. And for 1.5 years, the bureaucracy and the bureaucrats could not produce that iPad. And he called the IT guy and said, why is this happening? He said, oh, there's a process, there's a procurement process, there's this, there's that. He went back home and talked to his wife and said, can you imagine government cannot work? This cannot. He said he complained for 15 minutes to his wife, the second lady, until the woman tapped him and said, Mr. Vice President, you are government. And that is what all of us need to remind ourselves. All of us, right from our family unit, to our clan, to our ward, our local government, to our state, and to our federal government, we have responsibility as obligation as citizens of a democratic federalist state. First, to participate, to engage, and to ensure, to hold the feet of those people who are in it now, so that when we to get it, we don't have other people to higher standard. We also have to perform more. However, government is a revolving door, and it's high time we get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Engineer Michael. So we have come to the end of the 2024 Diaspora Colloquium Conference organized by Diaspora Social Responsibility Initiative, DSRI. It is on this note that I would like to give the floor to our host, Barrister Bolaji Ladipolu, to round off the conference. Thank you for listening.
What a great way to end this discussion. I want to first thank our audience and people that joined in taking time off work and studies to join this program today. We really appreciate you, and we say a big thank you. I'd like to say a big thank you to Professor Damilola Olawi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, and we appreciate what you're doing for Nigeria at large over there at UNESCO. We also like to thank Mrs. Tosin Obeko, our delectable moderator, for anchoring this program. We really appreciate you. Dr. Jane Zirigwe, we really appreciate you for your time and contribution towards the success of our talk and discussion today. And Mr. Michael, I'll call you the data man. I'm so impressed with the figures, with the numbers, how you are giving it to us and make us understand data matters in anything. You can't just come up and say, oh, this is the way forward without giving a breakdown of why it's going to go about. We really appreciate it. So once again, thank you to all our speakers and our moderators. And I also like to say a big thank you to the team at the initiative. It's something we're passionate about, and we're looking for how we can contribute our quota to the development of Nigeria. That is why we facilitated our first program. This is going to be not going to be the last. It's going to be the first of many, just for us to engage people outside Nigeria and those in Nigeria on how we can take the social responsibility a little bit away from the government. The government can't do it alone, honestly. Look at the challenges we are facing in Nigeria right now. It's a lot. And if we leave it in the hands of the government, I don't think they will be able to provide all solutions. That's why initiatives like ours have decided to take it upon ourselves to contribute to the development of our nation and empowering communities and fostering national development, not just to the rural areas, the urban areas also. So basically, that's what we are doing. And if we look at it, participants can also meet people, networking. That this is an avenue for you to relate with people outside Nigeria, discuss business, discuss all sorts. But at the end of the day, the dream is for us to make Nigeria great again. That's what we are doing with our initiative. I want to thank our Madam CEO for putting the team together, how we are going to navigate and contribute our quota to the development of the nation, Nigeria. Nigeria is going through a lot right now, and my friends in diaspora, I always laugh at them, and I'll be like, "Oh, you guys are not facing what we are going through," because if you convert your pounds and dollars, Canadian dollars, and what you earn over there with what we earn in Nigeria, it's a lot, but we can't give up, and I'm very sure each and every one of us has a lot to say about Nigeria. I want to beg Nigerians and people in diaspora, yes, we need to come back home. We need to not to relocate back to Nigeria, because a lot of people the Japan syndrome is out there. We don't blame anybody for doing that. But you need to contribute your quota to the development of our nation. Either ways, Professor and other speakers have given us how to go about it. You don't need to physically be present. You can contribute books, you can do a lot of things, start a foundation, or even partner with like our initiative, how you can help, how you can change the narrative about Nigeria and the economic woes we are currently facing. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is going to be it's not going to be the last. You will hear from us. Our website we're going to put it up in the group. If you want to know more about us, if you want to speak to us, and how you can engage people back home, and even people in Nigeria, how we can collaborate, how we can network. You don't know who you're speaking to. It might be your next business partner. So it's not about just helping. It's also about collaborating, and also the form of business relationship that we can also gather from there. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And this is not going to be the last. This is the first of many. And I want to wish everyone a good evening. And lastly, I'd like to say God bless Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.